What's up, guys? It's Talon. Today we're going to be ranking the roles in Wild Rift from worst to best in terms of climbing in solo queue. Now, I want to emphasize a couple points before we do start the video, and the first one is going to be that I genuinely recommend that you play the role that you're best at more than playing the role that is best for solo queue, because you can literally climb on every role, as I have done. I've literally climbed on every role, so I'm an example of this, but I still will rank it because obviously some people find it interesting, some people want to change roles, kind of like how my video yesterday talked about that. And then additionally, I want to mention that it does change based on the elo that you are in, and so I'm going to have caveats in my rankings of each role in terms of what is actually the best for different elos, and which ones are better and higher and lower elos as well. So anyways, let's get right into it. All right, so starting off with number 5, we have ADC, and God, I hate playing this role in solo queue. Let me tell you why. You are very reliant on your support as an ADC. Supports have more agency in the lane, they can make more plays, they just generally have more control over the game. ADCs generally need to wait till later items before really being impactful, which means they have a lot less early impact on the game, so you're going to be relatively reliant on the fact that your team doesn't fall too far behind. Additionally, if the enemy decides to target you, it's very easy for them to kill you no matter what you do, because you're a very squishy champion. You often have to rely on peel from your teammates. So basically, you have a heavy reliance on team, which is why in solo queue this role is very bad, but in duo queue this role is extraordinarily strong when you're duo queue with a support, for example. But in solo queue it does differ depending on the rank, so this control and this lack of control and agency is really important in high elos, because in high elos the enemy will punish you, they will target you, and so it's going to be a hard role to play. However, in lower elos oftentimes the enemy will not bully you as hard, they won't punish you, they'll allow you to get to later items very easy, and they'll allow you to scale up. It's just going to be generally very easy to get to the proper items. And in solo queue, in lower elos, it's much more important to be the damage dealer, because oftentimes your damage dealer will not know what to do and then will die, and even if you're a good engaged champion, you're not really going to be able to do much. Whereas later on in the later ranks, being an engaged champion and controlling kind of the game is a lot more valuable than just being the damage dealer, because most people in high elos can do damage relatively easily. So in terms of overall, ADC is the worst role in solo queue, but it gets a lot worse going higher and is a lot better in lower elos. Okay, the second worst role for solo queue is going to be top lane. Top lane is a very isolated role, which means even if you get your lead, it's going to be very hard to impact the map early on and to really be able to spread that advantage to the rest of the map. Some people are quite good at using their advantage and spreading it, but it's just definitely more difficult than a role like mid or jungle, for example, that's much more closer to the rest of the team and opponents and can easily find ways to fight. This role is going to be especially hard to carry on in higher elos, because in higher elos people are going to have an easier time and they're going to understand better how to avoid silly deaths, and they're not going to be able to get stomped as easily, because the way to really spread a lead or to get a big lead in top lane is going to be to stomp your lane rather hard. And so when you have a big skill differential, it's going to be a lot better to climb on. So again, in lower elos, you're going to have a better time if you're a lot better than the average player in your elo carrying on top lane. But once you get to a certain elo, it's really hard for people to necessarily, or rather for anyone to necessarily carry super hard out of this role, just because most people are going to be able to play relatively safe, and they're going to kind of understand how to play a lot more matchups. Now, if you are duo queue with a jungler, for example, it's going to make this role a lot better, because you can play it synergize really well with your jungler and make a lot more plays. But overall, because of the fact that this role is so separated from the rest of the map and it's hard to really have a big impact overall on the game, this role is going to be number 4 overall on the list for hardest to carry in solo queue. Now, the support role is going to come in right in the middle at number 3, and it's going to be kind of the opposite, where it is a better role the higher up you go, and not as good lower in elos. So the reason that it's higher than ADC, its direct lane partner, is because in support, you don't have to rely as heavily on your ADC to be good. If your ADC isn't good, you can roam around the map. You basically have a lot more impact on a lot more roles rather than being confined to just your individual role. Additionally, you can play really well in terms of playing around your team in the early game. You can make a lot of plays and have a lot of agency in the early game, and you also will have plenty of good scaling champions. It also has diversity in terms of champions, where you can pick engaged tanks to really make plays. You can also make pick champions that can facilitate carries really well in enchanters. So it has, again, champions that can work with different team comps. It has like a good variety in terms of that. It has a lot more impact on the map in comparison to both Baron lane and ADC as well. But it does lack in damage, which is why it becomes not quite as strong as the other 2 roles. Because again, as ADC or top lane, when you do get a big lead, the onus is kind of on you to carry the game. you have the more agency because the gold is on you. You can deal the damage, right? But as the support, of course, you do have to rely on your team to deal the damage. So if I am playing in, say, Platinum, and I make a really good engage, oftentimes my teammates, they're not going to follow up and they're not going to do a really good job. But if I make an engage in Grandmaster, Challenger, Sovereign Elo, my teammates are generally going to follow up decently well, and I'm going to be able to impact the game a lot more because my team's going to know how to play with the lead, which is why overall support is 3, but it is probably number 2 or even number 1 in the highest elos. Probably I would say number 2 overall, but in the lower elos, it's more around 4 or 5. Now after that, we have mid lane, which of course makes jungle number 1, but we'll talk about mid lane. We'll kind of compare it to jungle as well. So mid lane is connected to all parts of the map, as is jungle, and you even saw the reasoning for support. Again, all of the roles that have more impact on the entire map are the ones that we consider better for solo queue because you can impact more parts of the game and quicker. Now, mid lane, the advantage it has over jungle is that you are in a lane, which means that you can outskill your opponent directly more easily. What I mean by that is, say that the counterpart in mid lane, you know, the enemy mid laner, is not a very good player. You're going to be able to really style on them, solo kill them early, get a giant lead, and exploit their really, you know, bad gameplay. Whereas, say that you're playing jungle, it's going to be harder to exploit a bad jungler directly. Now, there's certainly ways to do it, but it's a little bit harder to exploit a bad jungler directly because of the fact that you're not directly laning against them. You can't mechanically outplay them. You have to outplay them solely with your brain, whereas you can kind of mechanically outplay people a lot easier in the mid lane. Now, mid lane has real good opportunities to roam quite frequently. You can, again, play for your lane phase. You can play to roam. There's a variety of champions, from mages and late game champions to ADCs to assassins to even tanks. So you can really play a variety of champions in this role. You have the damage. You have the ability to impact a lot of, you know, different parts of the map. And you have the fact that you're a laner so that you can stomp people extremely well, which is all of the reasons that it's a really, really good role. Now, it can be a little bit harder because of the fact that you are confined to a lane, because you don't have as much freedom to roam around and impact a lot of different parts of the map quite as much, which again is one of the reasons that jungle's number 1. We'll speak more about jungle, obviously, after that. And sometimes it can be hard in certain lane matchups. Again, if you're playing a late game champion, you're not going to have a ton of agency in the early game, but if you're playing an early game champion, while you may be able to snowball really well, it will be a bit difficult to carry the later parts of the game. You don't have access to as much gold as some roles, such as jungle, because you're relatively stuck in the mid lane quite frequently. So just these types of things are why it wouldn't quite be at number 1, but it is an amazing role, again, for all the reasons that we stated. Very, very good role to climb on, especially if you like laning and you're looking for a role to carry on. This would definitely be the role for you. It's equally as good as well in high and low elos, which is another big benefit of it. And so that, of course, makes jungle number 1. Now, the first reason, as was the reason for the last 2 roles, is that jungle can impact every part of the map pretty much whenever it wants. You have access to just any lane at any time. Essentially, you can focus on, you know, ganking one lane over and over again to really get someone ahead. You can oftentimes be able to get various lanes ahead. So that's one reason why this role is so OP. Now, the main reason that it's so OP is that it has access to a ridiculous amount of gold. It's way easier to get gold on this role than any other role. Like, if you look at any high elo game where there's, you know, high elo junglers playing in it, you'll oftentimes see the gold and it'll be like, oh, top laner has 10k gold, mid laner has 9k gold, ADC has 11k. Oh, 15,000 gold on the jungler, and the other jungler has 13 or 14,000. Like, it's like early game, sometimes the laners can get more gold, but as you go into the later parts of the game, the junglers get access to more gold because junglers can start taking lane gold at the same time as being able to get all their farm. They're not confined to any one lane, so they can farm in various areas. They have access to, again, impact every lane of the map, get as much gold as possible, and they have crazy OP champions. A lot of the best champions of the game, Riven, Vi, Viego, Lee Sin, Rengar, they're all junglers. Like, some of them can play multiple roles, but most of them are junglers. Their best roles are junglers. Additionally, jungle can easily make it so that you can play a late game champion and get away with it. Oftentimes, champions like Kayle, they'll really struggle in the early game, but these champions can play jungle pretty easily because you don't get punished that hard. Invading is really hard in Wild Rift because the map is so short. It's so easy for your teammates to come and help you on an invade, so it's really, really hard to actually invade consistently, which is why late game champions can easily farm up even if they're not that strong. So there's just so many different types of champions that can be played. There's access to so much gold. You can impact every part of the map. And even if you do have really bad laners, which I know is obviously the main complaint of jungle, sometimes you just get 3 bad laners. You have AFKs, you have everything, right? Even in those games, you can farm up and oftentimes literally just be able to solo carry, despite everything like that occurring because of the fact that you just have access to so much gold. And this is again a role that's equally as good in every elo, whereas I would say mid lane is really good in every elo, but I would say support in really high elo might be a little bit better than mid lane, whereas jungle is just #1 across the board in every elo. So as a whole, that kind of concludes the video. If you guys were looking for a role to switch on, my video yesterday kind of talks about what you should do and should you switch and that type of thing. And then this video is kind of going to give you an idea of maybe what role you might want to switch to if you're really looking to climb. Again, generally speaking, whatever map or whatever role is able to impact the map the most and have access to the most gold is usually going to be the best role. As always, I do coaching for $15 an hour. So if you're interested in getting coached by a rank 5 sovereign autofill player, just DM me on Discord at Talon1169 or through the link in my description to my Discord. And I'll see you guys tomorrow.